I'm Mike Barthel, and this is Risk Work News. A former IT cybersecurity expert, tonight's guest focuses solely on ICS and OT systems and their security. He's designed security in a number of different business verticals in both commercial and the public sectors, including time with the DoD. He's known by his peers as the real deal, a true subject matter expert in the area of ICS security. Please welcome back Isiah Jones.
Woo! Yeah. Woo!
Hey Isiah, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing all right, Mike. How's it going? Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back. Things have been a little crazy here the last few months. I think it was right at the beginning of COVID when we started talking about this stuff, and here we are, man. So,
yeah, we want to get on the COVID stuff. It's just,
yeah,
I don't think anybody realized. Well, it's just a lesson in the fact that we still don't know how to do crisis management in this country.
That's right. We're learning as we go here. Basically, the main theme here is we want to break down control systems and ICS security. And, RealPars has some great videos, and we're going to go ahead and share those again. We do that all the time. And thanks for turning us on to those, Isiah, those RealPars videos that talk about control systems. But from your perspective, talk a little bit about control systems and what what you get involved with, and a little bit about maybe what your day-to-day looks like doing this stuff.
Well, as far as control systems for the lay folks out there, I mean, you have different types of control systems. The government and a few other people came up with the term ICS to kind of group them all together. And there are some folks that still don't like that term, more operational technology now, or cyber physical systems. But in a nutshell, for the lay folks, you have different types. The classical types with SCADA, DCS, which, distributed control systems, were more local to a plant and a specific groups of processes. They were normally they had a central redundant master brain that kind of controlled all parts of the processes. Then you had the supervisory control data acquisition, which was more the traditional client server model with an application in the control center or on the desktop controlling, all types of remote terminal units or programmable logic controllers that could be distributed all over the world, or, think of thousands of miles of pipelines, or, an entire piece of electric grid, for example. But these days, there's a lot of similarities between the two different types of systems. A lot of the vendors kind of do some cross bleed over, like PLCs and RTUs are almost, the newer ones are almost identical as far as capabilities, but, RTUs are more still remote telemetry, cellular, satellite, microwave kind of stuff. But those are the primary main components. Obviously, below PLCs, you have variable frequency drives. You got, sensors. You also have smart meters and, other controllers that are like PLCs, but they don't like calling them that, right? Intelligent electronic devices, process automation controllers. And generally speaking, for the public, they basically control and monitor and manipulate the physical world, right? They're controlling pumps, they're controlling, different types of valves, controlling devices that measure and take inputs for measuring flow and temperature and pressure and those kind of things. And the layperson's, every day you're getting an elevator. The elevator has sensors to keep you from smashing your arm in the door. That sensor sends an input to a controller that's in that panel that's telling the door to open back up, right? That's kind of a basic control loop that you're going to see every day if you're getting in an elevator, or, same with turning on the lights and on and off. Those are things that underpin our lives every day that people don't pay attention to, right?
Right.
As far as me, my day-to-day today, especially post-COVID, is a little bit different. Because as we spoke before, I was happily staying away from government and focused strictly on the private sector and the municipalities and international customers. And then with COVID and things shutting down, I kind of got sucked back into the Intel community. It was kind of one of those things where, hey, I have money from here to here. I'm burning through all of my money. I need to take something that's going to bring in some revenue. Right. So I can't go into details on the stuff I do or which agency it's for, but right now I'm on a contract where, in addition to focusing on ICS, now I also have to focus on weapon systems. So you can probably imagine which agencies they are sitting in Maryland.
Right.
So that driver, they sucks because I live in Virginia.
Right.
And because of COVID, a lot of the places we would normally be traveling to don't want us showing up on site right now. So we're all mostly moving in and out of secure rooms to kind of help them remotely and help some folks in the national capital region that are local, right? So we can still get out and be on site. So I kind of started to have to add focus on weapon systems, which have some dependencies on control systems. And believe it or not, some weapon systems, especially like ground stations for, both public and private satellites and military stuff. I mean, believe it or not, some of them use the same types of PLCs and HMIs as everything else. I saw that in the past when I first got in the ICS 6 years ago, supporting the Navy and Marine Corps. So that's kind of my day to day, is focusing on big mission type stuff like cannot fail, tier one type of assets of like, hey, if this happens, it's going to impact our ability to defend ourselves, which ICS is important. That's the government customer side. On the commercial customer side, the same as always. Someone comes to us for work, whether it's a different types of assessments or systems testing, validation, or just some security advisory stuff. So how do I build an ICS program, or how do I add an ICS program to the IT cyber program that I have? What is the 62443 standards for ICS? What is 84 for the safety systems? So I kind of still do that leadership, coaching, building business on that side as well. And then obviously we have partnerships with vendors that I won't mention, but actually I probably could mention some. So the security vendors that make ICS tools like CyberX, Tenable, because they acquired Energy, those kind of. But then you have the actual control system vendors who I care about more than anything. Because I have a reputation for not caring about vendors, but they forget. I care about the control system vendors who aren't getting enough attention. I care less about the security product vendors who are just bolt-on solutions that don't actually fix the problem. So I just want to clear that air with all the folks that are like, Isaiah hates vendors. I don't necessarily hate vendors. I just don't like security product vendors thinking they have the solution. No, you're a bolt-on thing to tell us that there's something wrong. You didn't fix anything. So I like to focus on the actual controls vendors. So, I've had relationships in the past with Siemens, trying to do relationships these days with Schweitzer, Schneider, and everyone else. So whenever I can work with them directly, especially throughout the supply chain or on design projects where they're putting in their own products, or if I can kind of get training through them, get on their quote integrators list to have the credibility to work with other integrators who don't know anything about security, right? So same as always, I'm kind of touching everything left of Boone. Yes, I'll still go in and use my old SOC, IR, incident handling forensics. I mean, I have a degree in that stuff from a decade ago. So yeah, I still know how to do that stuff, but that is not my main focus. I try not to get sucked into it as much. I try to coach and help people understand, what we're actually trying to protect out in the field. So that's kind of my day to day is, being that national security type guy again. So trying to keep one fit in private sector, because that's where I really like playing the past few years exclusively. And then now I got another foot back into the military and intel and national security community, which I don't think I'm ever going to be escaped from, because as people get old, pass away, and retire, it's like, tag, you're it, Isaiah. This is what you get for being a unicorn. That's my own fault for being bored. Yeah, they do. I mean, I like my the guy working for now. He's like, they're never gonna let you fully walk away from this, right? Yeah, no, screw these agencies and people. But it's like, can I just go back and play with technicians? That's what I like doing. But it's not gonna go away. It's our infrastructure, and now we got to deal with weapon systems and other emergency management stuff that's heavily primarily dependent on that infrastructure, right? So my day-to-day is focused on all those things like crap. It's not just the ICS now, it's all this other stuff hanging off of it that we don't pay attention to, right? We can't do command and control. We can't do emergency management. We can't defend ourselves if they take out these systems, because that's our way of projecting power, So now I'm dragged into that too.
Well, one of the things I wanted to kind of dig into when we talked about control systems up front, talking about PLCs, programmable logic controllers. And I guess the question is who programs these things, and how does that affect our national security?
So this is where I like to stay further left of boom in the design, in the integration. And you were mentioning that you're talking to my old teammate, Jake. I'm happy to see that the PLC secure coding practices got picked up by the Global Cyber Alliance at ISA. Me and Jake are big advocates. I was so happy to see his talk take off at S4 back in January, the last time we were all traveling, right? But years ago, when I had brought it up on the 62443 in the meetings, nobody wanted to go back and update the 4-1 part of the standard that talks about mature development life cycles to specifically call out PLCs. And I'm like, how do we have an automation standard that doesn't specifically call out PLC languages? The short of that was, someone should write about it. Yeah, me. So I did that 2 years ago. It was a dud. Nobody really seemed to care. Then me and Jake linked up together when I got to Jacobs. And he was like, hell yeah, man. He's like, I've been programming this stuff for over 30 years. And we've burned our fingers. And I got a whole book of stuff. So he had this long document. I mean, the PowerPoint that he did at S4 was like barely the tip of the iceberg, the stuff that me and Jake were sending back and forth. So I love the fact that he understood and he didn't shoot me down. In fact, he's like, dude, I already got all this stuff. Look at this, look at this. And, we were doing projects together, like testing stuff for other customers. We started looking at, hey, look, this product over here, look, they don't even have like a time data type or function. How do we program that in the ladder logic and function block? That doesn't make any sense. So like actually looking through how the programming works on some of these products and realizing there's something wrong here.
Right.
This isn't good. And then how do we come up with practices on how you should program? Because nobody wanted to touch that, right? It's just these two crazy guys, Jake and Isaiah, beating the drum, right? So I'm happy to see that's being done. Now, the primary people programming it could be, and this is why the project's important, because there's over 800 people in there last I checked. Sometimes these PLC programmers are just like regular IT programmers, right? They get a job to go program something, they get the specs, and they just write the code and they leave. They have no freaking clue how anything else works. If you're lucky, it's a programmer that works for the integrator that's doing the project. Also, maybe you might get lucky with a programmer that actually works for the vendor. Like I remember when I was working with Siemens Building Technology guys years ago, I happened to be in the Beltsville office one day and I happened to sit next to the guy that programs all the fire stuff because I was working on the other stuff, but a lot of it rolls back up into Apogee, right? But there's that group, as you know how these companies work, they acquire other people, right? And they roll in under their product name, but some of it's still on the back end, its own little thing, right? So this guy was programming and stuff. And I'm like, hey, so we started a conversation on who programs what. And I overheard the meeting you were in about this, and this. Did you guys know that impacts these other things? So you have a lot of people out there touching it. Random coders, integrators, the vendors and their own staff at different business units. And then obviously, as Jake will tell you, I mean, he was one of the lucky ones. Being at that water utility for 30 some years, they were able to build up their own smart team of people like him, right? But that's so rare. It's like I've rarely ever run into that in any sector, in any customer, even large companies like big pharma companies, oil and gas. Like if they have a group of folks like Jake, they're blessed and they should hang on to them. And if they're getting older, a guy I worked with years ago back with Conoco, I heard he passed away. So it's not a joke that we're losing these guys. Rest in peace to him. Yeah. But when we have people like Jake around, I'm so happy that people were smart enough. Like, let's take advantage of this knowledge while we still have these gems. And let's bring the whole world together because everybody on that forum now is just younger people too that are programming and now they can learn from Jake, right? These guys are learning how to program in school and just coming out and getting on these random contracts that have no clue about the safety implications, the security implications. So that's why it's important because PLC programming is just as wild west sometimes, especially when you go international, as web app developers or phone app developers, right? Anybody can do it if they know how to do it. They don't necessarily teach at school like how to do safety and security, right?
Right.
And that's part of the problem. The difference with PLCs is you're programming something that's doing inputs and outputs and monitoring and controlling and sending something out to something that's going to actuate and move a pump or valve or change the speed on something or control pressure and flow. I mean, pressure and flow in the pipe can determine if it's going to cavitate and crush itself and explode whatever's in there. So when you see these neighborhoods, have pipeline explosions, and everyone wants to immediately argue, was it Russia or was it just a mechanical failure. Well, does it matter? Because it still blew up somebody's house. And I guarantee you 99% of that is because of pressure and flow. Well, what controls the pressure and flow? Probably the freaking valves. Well, what monitors that? Probably the sensors. What do they feed to? Probably a damn drive that feeds into a freaking controller that had logic that should have been programmed a certain way. So, paying attention to that left of boom, which is more of a design issue, which is still cyber, by the way, because people seem to forget that designing shit properly is a cyber problem. It's always been a cyber problem. That's the reason why we came up with the Rainbow series back in 70s and 80s. We came up with ISO common criteria. We came up with all the stuff decades ago on the IT and systems engineering side because of bad design break stuff. That is a security issue. Probably one of the original security issues. Insider threats. Insider threats could be mistakes. My farmer customer last year, the one plant we went up to, up in Ohio, that was because something happened, and it wasn't malicious. Half the staff had only been there for 6 months to a year. They acquired it from some other group. The integrators left everything in default settings, and half the people from the integrator that did it didn't exist anymore. Nobody knew where to find them, and that company was kind of like halfway out of business. So, and there's another integrator building up another piece of the plant at the same time. People just focus so much on, it's got to be ransomware or someone write exploit code and exploit CVE. No, genius. They could just be programming the PLC wrong, and it just so happens to be the one PLC that controls this valve or control these 3 pumps, and there's no backup PLC, and that's the only way they control those pumps. I mean, I've seen it happen on military bases. They almost evacuated because of one PLC that programs the pumps for pumping the water, which was their only source of water, happened to be the one that had problems. This is not theory. This stuff happens. If it's done right, then there's going to be redundancy, right? If you have a DCS and you have some safety systems, by design, they build redundancy in, they build checks in, they build mechanical safeguards in. But even though, if you just watch the chemical safety board videos that Jake used to tell me, I mean, sometimes that manual control doesn't work if humans are doing dumb stuff, right? Or if someone thinks they set it in a certain condition and then the control system's doing something different, you still have accidents. Go watch all the chemical safety board videos. It's like, this thing was supposed to be in this situation. Oh, it wasn't. Well, the control system said it was doing this. Well, the control system didn't know that some human was out here doing something else because these two humans didn't talk to each other. So when they assume that just putting in mechanical safeguards is going to stop an attack or stop an accident from happening, because with control systems, we shouldn't be worried about who's doing it as much as we should be worried about what are the consequences. That should be the focus first, because the consequences can happen by accident, by a disgruntled employee, or Russia, China, or Joe Schmo hackers found stuff on Shodan and they got bored and didn't know what it was. I mean, how they got to it is too much of the hype focus. That what they do when they get to it needs to be, there needs to be greater emphasis on that. And there's not enough of it. And I think PLC coding in general definitely needs to have a greater focus, because you can stop a lot of things with how the PLC is programmed, who's programming it, how it's being programmed, what practices are going into your coding specifications, so that we can validate and test it. And then long-term, how do we build tools to speed that testing and validation up, right? And then how do we build libraries of function block and ladder logic? Because some of the vendors do this now, right? For certain things, like in Siemens CIA portal, there's certain things you can just drag in, like they don't let you program it from scratch. So I'm like, well, take that next step. How do we prevent them from programming stupid from scratch? Like, just stop them from doing it. Don't even give them the option. See what I mean? So that's my vision of hoping that this project turns into, how do we get everyone to follow these practices? Now, how do we get the vendors to just make all the programming software, not even allow this shit to happen in the first place? Like, don't even give them an option. You know what I mean?
Exactly. One of the things that I was talking to Jake about also, that kind of coincides with this. So there's 16 different critical infrastructure. And one of the things that we brought up and he was talking about was the wastewater and the, just the waste and wastewater infrastructure. What do we do with ICS security equipment or not? I'm sorry. What do we do with ICS equipment when we're through with it? I mean, how are we disposing of it?
I wish I could give you a positive answer of, people were following old guidance from NSA and NIST on how to dispose of hardware and software, but mostly the hardware piece. But nobody knows that on the control system side. Hell, even on the IT side and commercial sector, people still forget that guidance has been out there and been public for years. But I can tell you, a lot of people just put stuff on eBay. That dumpster diving picture that I have on my website and that people like to laugh at. No shit. That same plant, the guy had only been there 6 months, was getting his own laptop from Best Buy where we're sitting there interviewing him and walking through the plant. And also he's like, oh yeah, I just replaced these HMIs. The other ones are in the dumpster. And I'm like, hold on, wait, what? He's like, yeah, the dumpster guy's about to come. And I looked at the customer from the corporate guy. I'm like, we should go check this dumpster. He didn't throw the things in the dumpster, really. No shit. Yes, he did. We went there. We rescued those suckers. And I was like, hey, you want me to tell you what I found on this? He's like, yeah, let's just not talk about that. And I did, I sent them whatever I could find. I didn't find anything too bad other than the fact that same integrator kept leaving default stuff and everything. Like I powered the sucker up and then booted right into a local admin account. I'm like, yeah, well, figures. I expected that though, so it wasn't anything earth shattering. But just making them aware of like, hey, we're gonna make a policy that says do not throw this crap in the dumpster. Tell us about it so we can figure out what to do with it. How about create a spare parts or backup parts inventory, since most people don't do that. So probably start with stuff you're gonna throw out. Maybe just an idea. You already paid for the shit. Like, right. Duh. I mean, you think this is common sense, but it's not, right? Because folks are just trying to do their job every day. So I don't like to come down on technicians because they're the last person you should blame, right? Unless they're intentionally trying to do crazy stuff. Like obviously I've had cases with actual insider threats. They got pissed off on their shift and they intentionally tried to do harm. Those guys, yeah, handle them. But most people, they're out there, like Jake calls it, burning their fingers because they're not getting support or training. They're understaffed. They only been in the plant for 6 months. It's not their fault the stupid thing got acquired and the company doesn't know crap about what they just bought. Right. That's not their fault, right? So how do I help them is the attitude I always have. Because if I'm not helping them, then we're never going to solve the problem and we might as well not even be doing it. There's all this threat hunting stuff is cool, but I still need to actually go help this technician on, hey, don't throw this out. Hey, let's build a spare parts little closet over here that you can lock the stuff up. Hey, let's use this thing to test if our ideas and theories on how we can configure something actually works. Let's try it on that thing since you're going to throw it out anyway, right? How can we be helpful to them? But right now, I've never seen any type of official procedures or approaches to how people are getting rid of stuff. I mean, stuff's on eBay, stuff's in the dumpster. I mean, where I'm at now with the one prime on the contract, they needed a controller. He just bought it from some random dude on eBay, and I'm like, bro, we don't even know what's in that thing, what they changed, what the settings are, if the firmware has been tampered with. Hey, let's just buy it and play with it. It's better than throwing it in the dumpster. But unfortunately, that's what you're gonna find. It might be in a dumpster, it might be on eBay, it might be in somebody's house, or just sitting in the closet somewhere collecting dust.
Right. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about, just to kind of extend our conversation from last time, we talked about how, society wants to make everything faster and, just more convenient. And what we're doing is getting rid of traditional safeguards. And so we talked about change management and changing the environment and changing cultures and you really honed in on morals and ethics. And so I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts of the business or on the business of security as a whole? And what I want to kind of bring up is I know when I talk to Jake and other people, Jake has this old school, he claims to be an old school guy himself, even though he isn't. But he says, back in the day, in the 60s, that was how safety came about. We had to sell it. Or they had to sell it. He wasn't, I'm sure he was like in his teens or something.
Jake is actually pretty up there. Don't let him fool you. He's one of those people that I hope he lives to be 100 because we need him.
Yeah.
But no, he's right. Me and Jake kind of agree on a lot of things. He's right. When the safety stuff first came around, no one really gave a crap, right? But The difference between that was there was enough evidence with all these damn explosions, especially in Texas and people's, like what, in New Jersey and California, all these places where people's neighborhoods caught fire or they had to evacuate. It's like, look, you can't keep ignoring that, right? People's drinking water getting tampered, I think the safety guys had a lot more traction because it was clearly obvious that stuff was catching fire, damaging people's food, people getting cancer. So that was kind of like in your face. We must do something about it. The problem with security, up until more, more recently, and even recently, people still look at it as, oh, that's a one-off incident. Whereas with the safety guys, they quickly figured out, yeah, you probably shouldn't. There's probably limits on how much pressure and flow you can put through a pipe that's a certain diameter of a certain material, and you're going to put it in someone's residential neighborhood. That's probably something we should be concerned with. Well, when you add the security of, hey, we probably should also be concerned about drift in the sensors intentionally caused by a dumb human who decides it's a good idea to mess with it for whatever their reasons are, internal or external. It doesn't really freaking matter. They're still doing it. Those drives and motors, the valves, everything upstream, the logic that it's feeding inputs to in the PLC. Yeah, we probably should worry about that, right? So selling security as supporting or improving and protecting safety is definitely something that a lot more people have been focused on. I know in IS-84 is kind of how we're pushing it, as feeding security as just part of that existing step of evaluating the system under consideration. And updating your specifications to include the security weaknesses. So when you select safeguards, you don't just look at, oh, well, I put a manual check valve there, so I don't need to worry about the safety controller. Well, yes, you do. The safety controller can be compromised. By the way, some human, again, go watch the chemical safety board videos, that check valve might not be in the position it's supposed to be in because some humans made a decision one day and forgot about it. Or integrator didn't do what they were supposed to. That happens a lot. Or the drawings and what they believe to be done is outdated. So maybe it was set properly. Anything can happen during operations. That's why accidents happen. Last year we had multiple accidents last year that I think Marco Ayala, he does a good job of posting accidents.
Right.
So that people remember that ICS is there for the physical world and accidents happen all the time. You just don't focus on them. And in my opinion, a lot of those accidents happening because humans in control systems and safety systems, or one or the other, or all the above, didn't work the way they were believed to or designed to or should have worked, because otherwise the accidents wouldn't happen. They designed those systems, especially the safety systems, to fail in a safe way or not to fail at all, or to fail close to cause something else to trigger downstream. That they take that in consideration when they design. That's part of the IS-84 standard. It requires them to do that. So they've been doing it for decades, like Jake said. So the security folks are starting to work together and start figuring out, how do we sell that security can protect safety? The problem comes in with normal control systems where there's not a lot of, quote, safety systems involved, and certain environments where it's not heavy process chemical safety, where they know what a PHA is and they've been doing it for decades, right? We start getting to some of these other environments where they don't necessarily, quote, focus on that side of the safety culture. They focus more on the, like, hey, don't fall from a ladder type safety. That's where I've seen a lot of issues of trying to get them to understand, hey, yeah, focus on arc flash, focus on this, but also focus on these controllers over here. And who's touching them and how they're being designed and programmed. So that, quote, safety culture means a lot of things to a lot of different people, right? So you just have to take that in consideration. When you say safety, you need to get in the weeds and figure out where you're at, what kind of environment you're in, and what's the extent of their safety. I've been in manufacturing plants where I brought that up, and they didn't get into like doing a PHA for the actual systems and putting in safety controllers and hard, dry contact relays or any of this kind of stuff. But then I've been in other plants where they put in some mechanical stuff because they had robots and they had other things. They put cages around them. They were actually going all the way with trying to protect people, right? So when you say safety, and this was in the same company, right? So even within the same organization, different environments, different plants, different parts of the plants, you need to codify when you say safety, what you specifically talking about. And the same applies to security. Now you're talking about, okay, how do I protect that thing that they decided would prevent these consequences from happening, or soften the consequences. Okay, maybe the person might get scratched up, but they won't have broken bones. Like they're trying to buy down that risk of fatalities or significant damage. Well, you want to protect that, right? So that's where security should latch on and say, hey, here's how something or someone could tamper with that safeguard in a way that you should care, because it'll cause these consequences you're trying to prevent from happening. What you don't want to do is, I think some people are starting to do the marketing again of like, the make it catch on of, hey, you can't have safety without security. And I'm like, well, technically you can, until you started accounting for the fact that somebody might actually intentionally do it. Then you need security. But if no one's intentionally doing it, then you did design safety in, if that makes sense. Like, so I think it's cool to latch onto that so we can try to convince this organizations to look at security. But I don't think we want to go all the way as far as to say there's no safety without security, because that's not 100% true. It might be true in some cases, but we can't just go around blanketing everything. It's like in DoD on the IT side when people are trying to do STIGs and they said STIGs broke my stuff. No, you broke your stuff, idiot, because you didn't read all the STIGs. You're not just supposed to blindly apply it. Like it's supposed to teach you to actually learn what your stuff does. And I think the same would apply to safety. Is like, learn what the safeguards are, why they're there, what they're trying to protect against, how you can bypass them, how humans can change the settings or change a mechanical setting on something and leave it that way and not tell someone, or maybe it was documented a work order that, got dropped to the bottom of the pile, whatever the case may be. Don't assume that means you also don't have security, and vice versa. Don't assume that you have security just because you have a lot of mechanical, pneumatic stuff, in the loop. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stop someone intentionally from messing with stuff, or someone making a mistake and then an attacker comes in, and the two things are unrelated, but the consequences are the same, if that makes sense.
Right.